All right, welcome back to a brand new video of the Target Individual Program, Target Experience. As I was talking in my previous video, I talked about my brother Ron Dalton here. Now, like I said, I'm not a subscriber to religion, but if you want to listen to a scholar that's going to make a very convincing argument about the biblical text and biblical narrative, there's no one on this planet right now that can even come as close to as this brother right here, this brother Ron Dalton right here. Now I'm playing this part because he's talking about the manipulation of people who lie, who manipulate, who deceive, that we are following, that we are believing, that we should not be following, neither should not believing, because they have no interest in seeing our people do better, our people elevate within the society, within their own land, within our own land, in terms of African people own land, because they have stolen, they have lied, they have manipulated their way into our ancestors, as well as the belief systems of other groups of people, history. Okay, and if you read the history, you will, and if you read true history, you will see that everything that our ancestors gave these people, they took it and they weaponized it against us, and against our ancestors, and against us as their descendants. All right, so and also he's going to talk about the covert and psychological covert warfare that they have waged on our people, and yet our people are so dumbed down. See, this is a brother that not only though he believe in the Bible or what have you, but this is a brother who understands the importance of knowledge and true history. Okay, besides outside the biblical aspect, but listen to what he has to say. This movie was inappropriately and incorrect. This is for copyright. This is for educational purpose. So Fair Use Act, the Copyright Act of 1976, Fair Use Act. This is for educational purposes. Correctly classified 16P by the South African Film and Publication Board twice. So two times, random selection of people were selected to sit down and watch the movie. So random South Africans were selected. White, Jew. When I talk about how our people are being programmed, you see how he keeps pinching his nose, right? And he's doing it almost like unconsciously, right? It reminds me of a photo, not even a photo, but whenever certain pictures of certain people amongst us are being displayed, there are these things that they do, right? Whether these hand signals or person standing next to them will be sticking their tongue out or what have you, or pinching their nose or what have you, right? These are all subliminal message to the people who are conditioned and programmed within the society, who know the truth, who speak the truth, right? And they do these things to try to silence us. Okay, don't fall for it. Black, Indian, they all sat down, watched the film twice. The committee, they watched the film twice, and they all came with the same 16P classification. The South African Board definitely said, no, you guys made a mistake. You guys were wrong. And they asked the South African Film Publications Board, you guys are doing it wrong. We need somebody else outside to make a decision on this. We need an expert decision. And that's where the South African Human Rights Commission, the Jews achieved their goal in banning the movie so that no South African can ever see this documentary. So again, I want you to understand how that they will go as far as to classify documentary made by our people that speak the truth, that they themselves cannot even dispute, because I've watched Ron Dalton spoke to different Jewish scholars, right? and they all could not rebuttal what it is that he said. They couldn't come up with an argument against what it is that he said. They couldn't come up with any sort of archaeological evidence, scientific evidence against what it is that he's saying. Right? So the people amongst our people who they will get these Negropeans to participate in targeting to try to discredit them, right? It is the fact that because these people are liars and my brother is speaking the truth, right? Not the truth in sense of the whole belief in the historicalization of Jesus or what have you. You know, I'm talking about the truth in terms of the geograph of the Bible, right? The geography. When the Bible talks about, you know, elephants and these things, that you don't, there is no elephant in what is called Israel today or even Palestine, right? There is no giraffes. There is no opicas. There is no rhinoceros, which they call unicorn. There is no lions there. You have to import lions, right? Because those are not animals that are native to those places, right?
In South Africa without being faced with jail time, 5 years in jail. So this was all by design, and no media attention was given to this matter. For the last 3 years, nobody knew about this happening in South Africa. So they control what we see because they control social media, including the things that are happening right now in South Africa with xenophobia and the Nigerians being, you know, kicked out and being attacked and all this other stuff. This is all by design. So when the ethnic groups seemingly override our right to free speech, right to an opinion, and right to freedom of expression using their Roman Dutch laws, then we have a problem. Because in addition to that right for freedom of speech to protest, to say, hey, these things are not right what you're doing to us. We have the right to protest and say we don't agree with how Uber is making us pay all this money and we're not getting paid anything. We're going to strike. We don't agree with how these companies are not hiring people or they're paying us low wages and we deserve higher wages and also that they have a right to protest because you have a right to free speech. You have a right to have an opinion and to say things on the air, on TV. In religion, the colonizers came preaching a white Jesus, white Jews, white Bible. Christianity is the dominant religion of sub-Saharan Africa, where God is a white man and is the Israelites. The Rhema Church in Johannesburg, one of the largest churches in South Africa, the Soweto Grace Bible Church, and the Shembe Church, all accept that modern Israel is the true Holy Land and the land of Canaan, and that the European Jews are God's chosen people. How do I know this? Because the Jews, they invited the leaders of the Shembe Church to Israel, and they got lessons on Israel and what they've been through and how they're the holy people and this is the Holy Land and all this other. They got lessons on this. The Jews sent for them, and they came to Israel. This is a fact. So sex, when you control the waves that we see and receive sexual immorality,
are the original humans on this planet. Doesn't matter whether it's the Neanderthal, whether it's the Homo sapiens. The fact is this, that you can find all 6 versions of hominids, right? And when I say hominids, meaning that these are different variations of what evolution had led up to we as a Homo sapiens today, right? And you can find all of them in Africa. But you can only find 3 of them outside of Africa, right? And which is the last 3, right? Which is the one, the Neanderthal, the Homo sapien, and then the Homo sapiens sapiens, which is us, right? So, but the other 3, the earliest 3 versions of hominids, you can only find them in Africa. So this is what my brother is talking about, and this is what they don't want people to understand. They dumb you down thinking that they used to say, well, you know, they're you know, Cheddar Man, and then you have Pekin Man. And what did they find out? That that these people were remnants of early African migration out of Africa, right? that was unable to travel back because of that last ice age. So when they got there, they could not. The journey to go back become very difficult because of the the ice age and so forth, the climate and what have you, right? Again, history. They used to teach you some challenge, like you have National Geographic at one point would talk about the truth about early migration out of Africa, and then you have the right racists, the religious right, who have infiltrated many aspects within the society, from archaeology to history to religious studies to science and so forth, in order to change the narrative, in order to do a frontal assault on truth, right? Because people were beginning, you had scholars who were beginning to see the truth as being more important than the ideology of white supremacy, because they wanted to know the truth. So the religious right, as well as racist liberals, right, who have infiltrated academia, science, medicine, these fields, in order to incorporate their religious belief system into these fields, or to discredit. Not understanding, I keep saying this all the time, when you go back and you look at the Catholic Church, right, even though they gave us Christianity, but when you look at the people who created, the person who created the Big Bang Theory, right, it was a Catholic priest who was searching for the truth and understanding the universe. See, they know where their concept of God comes from. They know that it is based off of other ancient myth, right? And you have priests that who looking for the truth, who found the truth. Just like you have a priest who tell you that the Catholic Church constructed this concept of Christianity that most people follow today. Okay? So when I say these things, which is why you start to see recently, academic researchers, are being called out for their lies, right? Because they are being sent to infiltrate and to discredit science, to discredit, certain fields, okay? Because they're just delusional. They have a mental illness, right? And that is brought on by their belief system. All right, let me continue.
Morality, including pornography, it's all allowed to be seen and distributed in Hollywood, the big theaters, on streaming platforms, websites, and social media, due to the ownership, foundation, and control of non-black ethnic groups. Travel. Europeans can freely travel, reside, work, and do business in other European Union countries. Americans can freely travel, reside, work, and do business in all the 50 states, including Hawaii, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands. In Africa, however, even though Africa gains independence from the colonial powers, in Europe, this is not the case. The colonial powers still left their laws. And the laws had never been changed that they left when the African countries got their independence. So the African diaspora, who were forcibly taken as slaves from Africa by Jewish, Arab, and European slave merchants, this is a fact. However, no African country has passed legislation giving the African diaspora unconditional, free right to citizenship and or permanent residency in their countries, even though they know it is the right thing to do. 30 to 90-day visitor visas, tourism visas, rejected long-term visas is not the solution. War, religious wars, tribal wars are instigated and are promoted for all eyes to see on the very TV, radio, podcast, and social media platforms that non-black racists don't control. So when you see the conflict in the Congo, the conflict in Nigeria with Boko Haram and the killing of the Christians, we see the xenophobia and tribalism in Ghana, you see it in Uganda now, you see it in the Congo, you see it in South Africa. They're letting you see all these things for a reason. This was the facts.
Same thing here. It is the same thing that's happening here, right? Pitting us against each other, using religion and infiltration of the black churches, right, to prevent those of us who may not be or no longer subscribe to religion, but want what's best for our people. So when you hear Negropeans talking about end times, you know, I keep saying, you talk about end times, right? As if, you know, you're waiting for the end of the world, right? That your Messiah is going to come back, right? Right? But look at MAGA. They see Trump as their Messiah. And of course, Negropeans will say, oh, that's a false Messiah and such, right? But let me ask you a question. What's going to happen when your Messiah returns, right? If your Messiah returns, right? As they said in the Bible, right? It's going to be the end of the world, right? You're going to go to heaven, right? But why are you so afraid that when, again, somebody's shooting a weapon aside or have you ducking and you saying, please, Jesus, you know, I don't want to die, right? Do you see that conflict there? And the reason why you would say that as a believer talking about end time prophecy is because it contradicts your natural ability that is built into your subconscious, right, of that ability to want to live, want to survive, right? Because that's who human beings are. Okay? And there isn't going to be any Messiah that's going to come back and take you up into heaven. Okay? I understand that, right? I mean, understand that. You know, your heaven should be here on earth. Your heaven is that black woman standing next beside you. Your heaven is that that black woman who supports you, right? Who give you that sense of joy and pride, right? To have a creator by your side, because she is a creator. Okay? You cannot create life as a man. She can. Yes, you help in that process, but a life is created within her. She has all of the tools, the ability, the anatomy to do what? To create a life within her. So she is a creator. As Dr. Ben would say, you know, we were born from heaven. And then as we become an adult, we spend our whole life trying to get back into heaven. And I always laugh, but he's absolutely correct. And until you understand that, when you go and you look at your ancestors, our ancestors, and how they depicted the goddess Nut, right, as stretching across the sky, and you see the stars within her, right? It is telling you that she herself is a universe. That she herself, when the Big Bang happened, that sparked life, this is what happened. When the male and the female engage in a certain activity, it is that same process that sparked life within her universe, her primordial womb, within her primordial waters in which life is created. See, this may be a foreign concept to you, Negropeans, but it shouldn't be, because deep down inside, you know it. Deep down inside, you know it. And this is why it's important that we study science, that we understand science, we understand biology, we understand chemistry, we understand math, physics, engineering. We understand all these things because other groups understand these things way more than we do in terms of the amount of people who are in those fields. Okay? But make no mistake about it. When you look at some of the greatest achievement in science, math, engineering, these things, you will see that we are right there with them. We just don't have the number of people in those fields like they do. And this is what we need to do going forward. Okay, now let me show you guys again. It's just Ron Dalton, love the brother, as he does an interview with a white South African. He was a police officer, was a commander of a police department. And he talks about the same tactics that they use here in the West, like here in the United States. Listen to what he's saying.
Hey, I was a conscript in the South African Army in 1988 and 89. Used to have to do 2 years. 1989 was the last year of having to do 2 years of compulsory military service, as Nelson Mandela was let out of jail and we moved towards the first free and fair elections in South Africa. But I was based up in northern Zululand near a town called Matubatuba in 121 Battalion, which was a Zulu battalion with a small cadre of white officers, but all the troops and a lot of the non-commissioned officers were Zulus. And one of the things that was going on in my area, because I was the law officer covering a very large area of northern Zululand up to the Swaziland-Mozambique border, was a small group of recce officers. That was like our equivalent of the SAS, Navy SEALs type soldiers, training local Zulu men to go up to the townships and the mine hostels around Johannesburg and in the Transvaal to deliberately foment racial tension and violence with other tribes based in those hostels and townships. And this was a very deliberate strategy of the South African government and the South African military at the time to create black-on-black violence, to detract from the potential for black-on-white violence, which in those days was very low because we had a very strong and violent police force repressing that side of things. But
okay, this is key, right? What he said. That so when they talk about black on black violence in the United States, black on black violence is something that is perpetrated on black people, right? So that the people who've committed the violence won't turn their attention on the people that are creating the problem, which is white people. This is what he said. He said you have a brutal and repressive police force. This is what you had in many black communities. And I talk about this. Okay, I'm not the first, won't be the last. Black people have been talking about this for decades. And you see the exact same thing was being done in South Africa. All right? See, police officers in black community are an occupying force. Police officers in white community are a protective force. You understand? Let me repeat that again. Police officers in black communities are an occupying force. Police in white communities are a protective force.
There was this massive deflection that went on right up until I left the army at the end of 1989. And a lot of white people don't know that, is that there was a very deliberate strategy, because what white people in South Africa at the time, and no doubt for some period afterwards, were often saying is, these blacks can't run a country because they're always fighting each other. These tribes hate each other, right? The Zulus hate the Xhosas, who hate the Ndebele, who hate this guy, the Pondos, and this kept saying that basically that blacks were too violent to run a country. And what most people have no idea of is that violence, that intertribal violence, was fomented by the white South African government, army and police force very deliberately. So we need to revise our idea of history, not just the recent history, the pre-apartheid history of South Africa, but the entire history of European and white domination of Africa, and the way that was presented to us through our education curriculum. The things we believe about the history of Africa and colonialism are not what actually happened, and are certainly not how Africans experienced that. Let's bear that in mind, people. Come on.
Okay.
Sub-Saharan Africa has been fundamental to the global prosperity of the advanced countries. And Africa had a role to play. It has a role as a raw material producer. We will not allow Sub-Saharan Africa to escape that. Okay, we do everything to keep Sub-Saharan Africa where it is, also impoverished. It's absolutely vital for the prosperity of everyone. So let's get clear about it.
So there you go. Same thing here in the United States. It is vital that this white racist system keep black people in poverty because it benefits everyone else. So when I talk about the 5, and also poor white people too, because there's more poor white people than there are black people in America, right? You need to understand that, right? But the difference is that poor white people, they have them believing, again, that's that belief system. They have them believing that they're better than black people, right? And that, the wealthy elites are also for them, which they're not. And instead of poor white people aligning themselves politically with black people, they align themselves politically with the wealthy elites and the wealthy white people, who will look at them and call them trailer trash and white trash and all these other things. But because their whiteness is more important than improving their situation, is the reason why they don't align themselves with black people. Same thing with Hispanics. And we see how they have the white nationalists has infiltrated the Hispanic community, and particularly outside of America, particularly in Mexico, where you have Mexicans who are now identifying as Nazis. Think about that. All right. But anyway, I just wanted to show you guys this again. Education is key, right? They don't want us to be educated. And I always say, listen, I don't care what you believe, but as long as you're using your belief system for good and for the good of humanity, but when you use it and you weaponize it against people who don't believe what you believe, when you use it and you weaponize it to keep our people stagnant and as believers so that they won't listen to the truth and understand that we are being destroyed as a people, then your religion, as well as the people believing in your religion, becomes my enemy, because you have made me your enemy first. All right? Talk to you guys in the next video.